Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's Tech Bites. I hope you guys are all having a great Thursday, no matter where you are tuning in from. Be sure to put where you're tuning in from in the chat today because we will be live on the map. I am in Ohio. We have our social media person in Texas, and we are joined from New York with my colleague and coworker, Julia.
Hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here, especially to talk about cloud backup, something I'm very passionate about. So, yeah, make sure to put where you're coming from. We're very curious to know about that.
Yes, thank you, Julia. And I think, I'm not sure, is this your first LinkedIn Live Tech Bite
So,
stream?
I think I've done it before, but a long time ago. Every time it feels like the first time, but I love doing these tech bites. So, yeah, I should come more often, come up here more often.
Yeah, definitely. It's great to have you here today. I'm
Thank
happy
you.
you're joining me because we have a really fun session planned for you guys today. We're going to be talking about effective approaches to cloud data protection and what's new from Veeam. Plus, you might, if you stay tuned to the end, you might get a little demo of what Veeam has just released for the cloud products. So let's go ahead and get started. So let's talk about some of the steps to secure cloud backup. Now, when you're looking at some of these steps here, you're probably thinking, hey, I'm using this on premises. Is that related to the cloud as well? And the answer is yes. These same steps to secure your backups can be used on premises and in the cloud. So we're going to talk about a little bit more about these through some of the slides, but first, let's go over them and see, just talk a little bit about them right now. So first is, following the 3-2-1 rule, utilizing a logical air gap, implementing the principle of least privilege, immutability and encryption, plus validating recoverability. So jump into following the three,
Quick
two,
thing,
one.
if you don't mind me interrupting you,
Yeah,
sorry, Kirsten,
it's
but
all good.
if you can go back to the previous slide, just one thing that I want to iterate is that when people move to the cloud, migrate to the cloud, they think they are fully protected. I've seen that a lot because the technology is different and they think that the cloud providers they will give you like full security on your environment, but that's not the case. So there is a shared responsibility model, and you can go to each of the cloud providers, AWS, Microsoft Azure, or Google Cloud. They have that on their website, and they say that it's their responsibility for the security of the cloud. So, all the infrastructure and maintaining the availability zones and regions. But it's your responsibility for securing your data, for securing your applications. Everything that you create on the cloud is your responsibility. That's why it's so important to talk about cloud backup, because if something happens to your data on the cloud, you're lost. They're not gonna, it's not their responsibility to back up your data. So very important to remind that, because I've seen people move to the cloud and they think, oh, okay, now I can forget about it. But that's not the case. Thank you, Kirsten.
Yeah, that's a good point, and thank you for bringing that up. I
Yeah.
mean, I was talking about earlier today how I felt something was off in my astrology chart, so I'm really glad that you
Yeah.
brought that up and stopped me because I feel like I just jumped right into it without any type of explanation. And yeah, it's really important to remember that shared responsibility model because, organizations today, they're not only on premises, they're moving to the cloud. They're taking advantage of what the cloud has to offer, the scalability, the durability, the flexibility. And within this session today, we will, even if you're in the cloud, maybe you're thinking about moving some workloads to the cloud, or maybe you're in a hybrid environment,
Yeah.
all these steps are really going to be helpful.
Hmm.
So the 3-2-1 rule, right? So this is applicable on premises and in the cloud. And this is a standard practice across the board, right? It doesn't lock you into a specific technology or any type of hardware. You can really apply this using with the tools and the technology with what you have today. And to put it in simple terms, right? You have the 3 copies of data, two on 2 different media types, and one offsite. And a lot of times when we think about, if we're on premises, where do we want that offsite copy? We might be thinking, in the cloud or at a DR site or a service provider. Is there any other ways that if you're in the cloud already where you could put that offsite copy? Julia, do you have any ideas for?
It can even be on another cloud provider, depending. If you're hybrid, definitely you can have a copy on premises. But some companies, they want to be, cloud native and only use cloud technologies. You can use another cloud provider to put your data on.
Yeah, so with whether you want to have that copy in Azure, Google Cloud, or AWS, those are all options that you need to consider when trying to follow this rule. So the next step we have is to utilize a logical air gap. And you might be thinking, what's a logical air gap, right? Well, cloud-based services are always online. So you can't really get that offline copy of your data unless you take that data and you bring it back on-site, on premises, and store it turned off, maybe on tape or something like that. So consider using this logical air gap, which is just making sure that you're putting a copy of your backup in maybe a different region or a different cloud or anything like that. And there are some different security boundaries and considerations per cloud. For example, AWS has accounts, Azure has subscriptions, and Google has projects, right? So when you're thinking about trying to air gap your backups, this is one of the ways that you're going to be able to do that. Do you have any tips for our viewers today about how they could potentially utilize this logical air gap?
Just, yeah, what you mentioned, it can be a different region in the same cloud provider, or, different accounts as well. And each cloud provider, they help you manage several accounts. So for instance, AWS has AWS organizations where you can manage all these accounts in a single place with a single console. So it's not that hard to have this logical air gap, but it's very important.
Yeah, I agree. And one of the things we also want to consider, not only are we going to be, air gapping our backups, but we also want to make sure that we're utilizing the principle of least privilege. Now, this is a principle that, everybody should know, but you might not know. I was almost confused by the acronym here for a second. I was like, what is this? It's the first time I've seen it, which is not abnormal for me, but this is just a fundamental security strategy where we make sure that users, applications, and services only receive the necessary permissions they need to perform their role and more. And there are a couple different tools that we can use, right? We can use identity access management, making sure that minimal credentials are required, locking that down, making sure we're routinely auditing these and deleting and rotating credentials as needed. We can also use role-based access control. So making sure that we're only giving access and permissions to users that they need to have to perform their daily tasks, whether that means protecting the data, maybe they're an application owner, just making sure that they have that role-based control so that they don't go in and work with other workloads or data sets that they shouldn't be working with. And then also utilizing multi-factor authentication, making sure that we're making sure we have another way to authorize access into our applications and things like that. Now, I was taking a look at this graph here. Do you want to walk through this chart we have on this page?
Yeah, sure. I can. I just want to mention one thing. A lot of people might not realize that one of the main reasons of data breaches is like internal people that leave the company and they still have their credentials. And then that's how, the company gets breached, they lose their data. So that's why Kirsten was mentioning it's important to audit the access control. So if you give someone their credentials and then they leave the company, be sure to, delete, terminate those credentials, because it's one of the first reasons for data breaches. We've seen this at Veeam. Now, as you can see here on the diagram on the slide, we have different regions and we have different accounts for our workloads where we're protecting the data. So from one account, we're replicating and sending to object storage to another account. And you have the identity and access management to perform those steps. So to perform the backup process, to perform the restore process, and that's it, So you shouldn't give, full access to anyone. Just what they need to do is that the person is a backup administrator. They just need to do backup. Okay, they will only have access to those permissions. So very important to understand that.
Yeah, thank you for describing that to us. And I just got word from our producers that the map is ready. So let's see where all you guys are tuning in from. So in North America and Central America, we have Georgia, Alberta, Canada,
Mexico,
Calgary. It was just in Calgary earlier this year, May. It was cold still. I was surprised. Mexico. And then in Europe, we have Poland, Portugal, the United Kingdom.
Nice.
And then in South America, we have Argentina. And in Africa, we have South Africa.
FYI, you should all check, go on Google Veeam on tours, because we will have events in your location. I saw South Africa, Argentina, Mexico. There will be a Veeam on tour there, so you should check it out.
Yeah, good point there, Julia, for sure, because I think Veeam on tours, I know we've done some in Europe, but they're just starting to kick off and they'll be going through the rest of the year.
Yeah, Asia, South America, everywhere.
Awesome. So let's continue on with what some of the strategies we have. And the next one is immutability and encryption. And if you guys have been tuning into any of the industry insight sessions or have heard us talk about this in the past, we really have talked about how, threat actors are attacking the backup storage. They're trying to make sure that you're not able to recover that data when the ransomware attack happens. So utilizing immutability and encryption is very important today because they're really going to help protect that backup data. Immutability and these cloud services, these cloud platforms have immutability available to you to use. When you think about Amazon S3 Object Lock, immutable storage for Azure Blob are really going to help you make sure that you can put that data in a immutable state. We also want to make sure that we're using encryption. This is really going to make sure that we are protecting our data. So anybody who gets access to that data, they're not able to read it, use it in any type of way because we've encrypted it already. And there are some services within the cloud that can help you with encryption, and that is AWS KMS and Azure Key Vault. Now, I'm sure you know a little bit more about these services than I do, Julia. Do you want to talk about them a little more?
So we work with these APIs. So Amazon S3, AWS KMS, Azure, the immutable storage for Azure Blob. So from the console, from Veeam Backup for AWS or Veeam Backup for Azure, you can check a box and make your backup, your bucket immutable. So very important. And also, if you see on the diagram, we're kind of progressing from the slides. So you can see we have different regions and we have different accounts for that logical air gap that Kirsten mentioned. We talked about the different, access management that is important for the principle of least privilege. And now you're seeing that, both object storage buckets, they need to have immutability and encryption. And when we say encryption, is both encryption in transit and at rest. Very important. Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. That is right. Encryption is important. I mean, we think about what if Rick was on this call right now, he would be like, if you don't encrypt your data, someone else will do it
Yeah.
for you, right?
Mm-hmm,
So
mm-hmm,
as colleagues of Rick, we're drilled in our brain, encrypt, immutability, immutability. So if you're not using these features, you definitely need to consider them and put them into your data protection
mm-hmm.
strategy. And now we're going to talk a little bit more about, validating recoverability. So we've talked about the 3-2-1 rule. We've talked about principle of least privilege, logical air gap, um, encryption and immutability. But this is really all stuff that's going to provide you, protecting your backup data. But a backup is only as good as its ability to recover. So we want to make sure that we're testing our backups, we're validating them, we're making sure that they're recoverable. And there's a lot of tools nowadays, and I know Veeam has this tool that you're able to perform a, antivirus scan on that data in a lab environment that's isolated from the network, or, before you recover back into production. So this is really going to make sure that, you're not storing bad data on your storage. And also when you're restoring, you're not restoring bad data back into your production environment. Other things to consider that are very important when you want to test recoverability is that this is going to give you the option to make sure that when that disaster does happen, you have tried recovering before. You know how to recover. You've experienced it. A lot of the times, we might think, oh, our backups are good. We don't need to worry about it. We don't need to test that. We don't have time for that. We can make up a lot of excuses for why we're not testing recoverability. But when that disaster happens and you don't know how to recover, or you can't recover, that's going to be, the worst case scenario, right? So making sure that you've tested recoverability and you're familiar with how to recover, that's going to be very important. Now, thinking about where to recover. So if your first site goes down, where are we going to recover that data? And there's some different options here listed on this slide. So we have, on premises to the cloud. Is your backup solution able to, restore to the cloud? At Veeam, we have, instant VM recovery to Azure, AWS, Nutanix, Google Cloud Platform. So really giving you that portability with your backups and that option to you to recover where you need to. Can you recover between accounts or between different regions? That is something you want to make sure that you have tested and you have tried before you come to that time, right? Cloud to on-premises, maybe you want to take some workloads out of the cloud. Are you able to recover back on-premises? And then in between clouds, right? Julia mentioned earlier, a lot of organizations, are considering using multiple clouds. Maybe they want that extra copy of that cloud, that data in Azure, but they use primarily AWS. Are you able to restore from AWS to Azure? All things that you really need to consider when you are testing recoverability. And we don't want to forget these built-in services, right? The cloud offerings have a lot of different services that are there to help you and make sure that you're staying secure within your cloud environment. And there are similar services across the cloud. So you have AWS Security Hub, Azure Security Center, and Google Cloud Security Command Center. And these are really good tools to use. They can analyze your environment, check for misconfigurations, and identify any risks that you might have currently so that you can go in and fix those issues in real time, making your environment a little bit more secure. So now that we've talked about some of the, effective approaches that it comes when it comes to securing your backup data, your cloud, let's talk about some of the things that Veeam has just introduced. And I know some of these things it's not like brand new, but some of it's definitely brand new. Julia, do you want to talk about a little bit more about some of these features from the latest releases?
Sure. So Veeam is always adding new protection to new workloads, whether on AWS, Azure, and Google. And we hear our customers, we hear their feedback, and we always try to implement them. And for AWS, we are now protecting also Amazon Redshift clusters, FSx, Amazon FSx. For Azure, we're protecting Azure Cosmos DB, and Google, we're doing Cloud Spanner. And besides that, we're also always adding new functionalities for you to make your environment more secure. So, immutability extension on AWS and Azure, you can now do backup copies for Azure Virtual Network backups. And Google Cloud, you have FLR, file level recovery to the original location, which is great if you want that granular recovery. And always, like I said, UI, UX enhancements, security enhancements, because we have that in front of mind. We want to help you have your environment as secure as possible.
Yeah, I always like how, we're constantly innovating our products to make sure that our customers are more secure and more protected. So we do have a special demo planned for you guys today, so I hope everyone's ready. But we do have a question from YouTube because we are streaming on YouTube, Facebook, and LinkedIn. And it's basically talking about recoverability and how to, estimate the cost it would take to recover. And we do have, I know there are some, pricing calculators out there, but sometimes we even talk about like FinOps, right? So when it comes to recoverability, Julia, do you have any tips or anything when it comes to making recoverability a little bit cheaper or more affordable when it comes to that?
So yeah, this is a whole nother topic. We even we have white papers and talks about that. How to save costs on the cloud, like for recoverability. But always, for instance, use S3 instead of just saving on snapshots, which is what Veeam does. And with Veeam you can also have deduplication and compression, which saves even more of these costs. There are a lot of things, but yeah, like I said, a whole nother topic. And feel free to reach out to us. We can talk about that offline.
Yeah, and too, also, I'm sure there's blog posts or even YouTube videos talking about this as well. So if you want to, we put our Twitters up there earlier. If you want to, tweet us, we can send that to you as well.
Awesome. So I think now is my turn. I'm going to show you a demo of how to perform the backup and primarily how to restore a Redshift cluster. And Redshift is a high performance petabyte scale data warehouse designed for online analytical processing. So it means that it's capable of processing and storing vast amount of data, making it ideal for analytical purposes such as business intelligence, complex queries, data analytics, etc. And this was an ask from enterprise customers, and finally we have it for you. Now, first here I'm on the Veeam Backup and Replication console. As you might know, if you want the latest security enhancements and updates, you need to deploy your Veeam Backup for cloud, for AWS, Azure, or GCP from Veeam Backup and Replication. I have already done that, so I'll click Open Console. And here it's going to open my Veeam Backup for AWS appliance. And it's the same feeling, like same interface for Veeam Backup for Azure or Google Cloud. You have all your information here in this initial screen, an overview of your environment. You can see the resources you have protected, now EC2. If you're familiar with this interface, now we have gathered, we've put together all the databases under one tab. So RDS, DynamoDB, and Redshift, and our file systems as well. Now, policies, the policies we create to protect our data, they protect the data, and then if you need analytics or monitoring, you can go to session logs. Now, let me show you Redshift. I have already created a policy for it to protect my cluster. I'm just going to walk you through how it's done. So first, you have to give it a name and a description if you want. Then you need to select an IAM role that will be able to perform the backup of the cluster. And here it's what Kirsten said. You should always implement the principle of least privilege. So in my case, since this is just a demo, I'm using the default backup, but that's not a best practice. So keep that in mind. If you want to add another IAM role, you can click on add, and then it will walk you through how to add an IAM role from there. You can also check the permissions to see if this IAM has the permissions to perform the backup. Now, after that, you have to select the regions where you want to protect your clusters, your data, basically. So I'm only selecting US East 1, North Virginia, but you can select more than one region. Then we'll select the resources that we want to protect. You can select all the resources, or you can select only certain resources by the cluster name or ID, or even if you have, tagged your resources, which is a great best practice, you can use this as well. Then you click, we're going to select the resources we want to protect. I have already selected the Redshift. Yeah, I can click on it. This backup policy is already running. And here you can see the item I have selected. Here, like we said, you can be very granular. So you can even choose resources that you want to exclude from the backup policy. Then here you have to specify the target where you want to store that data. So for Redshift, we're going to store the data in Backup Vault. And here you already have a Backup Vault as default, but you can edit and add other ones. But just a caveat, you need to create the backup vault before on the AWS console so you can see it here. I haven't created any. I'm using the default one, but again, yeah, you should create it before coming here to select your backup vault. Now, if we go next, here it's the backup schedule. So you can decide when you want to perform those backups. You can do it daily, you can do it weekly, monthly, or yearly. So let's see the daily settings. Here you can select when you want to perform those backups. So I'm just doing it at 5 a.m., but you can select more than once. And if you want to run it every day or only weekdays or selected days. And here the daily retention, I've lowered it to 1 day because it was just for this demo. Now, tags, like I said, it's a best practice. You can copy the tags from your clusters here, and they will automatically show up here. General settings, you can automatically retry policy if it fails, and you can choose how many times. And for notifications, if you have email enabled, you have to go to configurations to enable it, but then you would be able to select it here on this notifications part. And after, this is a great tool from Veeam Backup for cloud. When I say Veeam Backup for cloud, I mean all the three cloud providers. We have Veeam Backup for AWS, Azure, and GCP. And we have this cost estimation tool, which gives us transparency on how much this backup policy is going to cost us monthly. And for all the workloads, you get this cost estimation. So you're not going to be, shocked. There is that bill shock term by the end of the month. You will know how much is going to cost you. And this is based on AWS's prices on their listing on their website. So we're not making up these numbers. And then you get a summary. You can even test the configuration to see if it's going to work. So here you can see session finished with success. And if it doesn't work, it's going to tell you why, and then you can go back and fix it. So let me finish it. And here you can see this policy has run a few times already. So my cluster is protected. Now I'm going to the AWS cluster and I'm going to delete my cluster. So it has some data in it, but we're not going to go over in detail, about the data. It's just I'm going to show you deleting the cluster and restoring the cluster. And like you see, AWS tells you that all the databases and the data in the cluster will be deleted. If you have automated snapshots, also will be deleted. So that's why you need to perform backups of your Redshift clusters. I'm not going to create a final snapshot for this demo, but let's do delete. And let's wait a little bit until it's deleted.
We did have a question that came in from LinkedIn about when is the best time to schedule to test the backup inside that backups that reside in AWS, monthly, quarterly, or yearly. And I think that just really depends on, your availability, your business and your goals, right? Mm-hmm. I used to, my old manager, Melissa, always did DR test Tuesdays, where she would test the DR plan, right? So just getting on a schedule that is good for you to make sure that that data is recoverable is going to be important. Do you have any tips for that, Julia?
No, yeah, like you said, it depends on the business, always the more the better. The more you perform those tests, you'll feel more confident about being able to recover your data. But again, it depends on the availability, if you have the personnel to do that, time, etc. But I would say it's always better to do it more than less. So yeah. It's still deleting. Let me just refresh, see if it's has been deleted. Yeah, so no clusters not found. Now, here is just, I was going to mention it after. This is the documentation for Veeam backup for AWS. And here for, how to perform the backup for Redshift. You have EC2, RDS, DynamoDB, all our workloads that we protect. You should check it out. Now we're going to protect the data, databases, Redshift, and we want to restore the cluster that has been deleted. So we're going to click Restore and then select the cluster. Click on restore point, and here we can select the restore point. I will say select the most recent one, but you always need to select the one. For instance, something happened yesterday that corrupted your backups. You will select the day before yesterday. So I'm just going to select that, click next. The IAM role that has permissions to perform the restore, because depending on your organization, you have two different people doing, one is doing the backups and the other one is doing the restores. So they will have different IAM roles and different permissions. And at Veeam, we allow you to do that, to create granular IAM roles for that. You can also put your temporary access keys if you want to just perform this operation. Here you can select if you want to restore to the original location with the source settings or with different settings. I'm just going to restore with the same settings. You can give it a reason like accidental deletion or whatever happened, just so you can keep that documented. And the summary of what happened. So here I'm going to click finish. And let's see, session logs. You can see that it's running. So let's wait a little bit. It will take like a minute to be restored. I can click here and see all the operations that are happening while we wait. And do we have any other questions, Kirsten?
We do have a question from Facebook. How many days can we use immutable? How many days can we put? Sorry, guys. How many days is the best practice for immutability in S3 object storage? I'm sorry. I was trying to read that and it didn't come out the way it planned.
So yeah, there is no one the right answer. Like we said, it always depends on your SLAs. If you have compliance, in which industry you are in, because for finance industries and healthcare, they need to store their data longer. So the immutability needs to be set for a longer period. But it depends. You just need to keep in mind that for the period that you set that immutability, you'll be paying for that storage. So if you set the immutability for 90 days and after that you decide, oh, actually no, I don't need to, it doesn't need to stay there for 90 days, you won't be able to delete it, to do anything. Even the root account can't modify that data, because that's what immutability does. So keep that in mind.
Yeah, that's a good point when you think about it. And it's almost like, right, you set it for 90, you have that first restore point that is immutable for 90, but you also want to consider, right, that second restore point would be immutable for 90 days on top of that, right?
Yeah.
So it's like you continuously build, and then even if you were to change the mutability period, say you had it 90 days and then you change it to be like, okay, I want it 30 days, that doesn't change the retention period for those past restore points. Those will still be there for the full 90 days, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, it's definitely something to consider when using immutability. So yeah, and I know that we're running out of time here.
Yeah. I don't know if you wanna, what's going to happen after this is we're going to see success here, and then the cluster is going to show up again on the AWS console. I've tested yesterday and it worked for me. It just takes a while because the clusters on Redshift, they are pretty large. So that's why, it takes a few minutes. But we can also, we have videos on YouTube showing how to do that. So people that are interested in learning more how to do restore for Redshift clusters, they can check that out on YouTube. I have a lot of videos about that. And yeah, I think we can wrap this up if you want, Kirsten.
Yeah, and you also have a really good blog too that kind of walks you through like setting up AWS, Veeam for AWS, getting started in AWS. I know I've definitely come across and saw some of your blog posts. So if you guys want some more information, or maybe you're brand new to Veeam for AWS, make sure you check out Julia's blog. Do you know what the URL is?
It's juliafmorgado.com, and my YouTube is also Julia F. Morgado, LinkedIn, Twitter, everything. And yeah, I create a lot of content on Veeam Backup for AWS. And even if you're using Azure or Google, you can also, you should also check that out, because like I said, the tools are very similar. And the interface is similar, and you'll feel more comfortable using them when you check those demos and the content.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Julia. I appreciate you hopping on with me to do the Tech Bites.
Of course, it was a pleasure. I hope to do this again soon.
Yes, definitely. And I hope everybody has a great rest of their day and a good weekend ahead.
Yeah, bye.
Bye.